والسلام على رسوله الكريم وبعد. So in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, we begin by directing prayers to the Prophet Muhammad, asking that God grant him peace and invoking blessings upon him. It is a great honor, a great privilege to be with you as always. Mashallah, this was a session that we intended as mostly a conversation, and that's because we thought a conversation would work best with this format. I find it difficult teaching books and text and, more structured classes via Zoom, but something that's more conversational, something that's more interactive, something that gives a lot of different people an opportunity to add perspectives, to make their voices heard, etc. I think is more suitable for kind of the space that we have. So the floor is open. We do have some questions or a topic that people submitted from last week about authority, past, present, and future. But before going into that topic, does anybody have anything they'd like to start with? Okay.
I have a question. Oops.
Yes.
About getting ready for Ramadan. So I just saw in a lecture I was watching yesterday on YouTube about like when to fast and when it's not okay to fast. And they were saying that the month that we're in now is called Sha'ban, right?
Correct.
So they were saying you can fast, like if you're someone who normally fasts on Mondays and Thursdays, you can keep fasting during this month. But don't start fasting in the second half of Sha'ban if you didn't in the first half. And I was just wondering where that rule came from, because it's funny because I was actually thinking of like fasting a few days to get ready for Ramadan, and I'm like, oh shoot, I fall into the category of what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm actually not familiar with that ruling, which doesn't, by the way, I know some speakers, some teachers, when they say they're not familiar with something, it's like a very polite way of saying that what you're referring to is inauthentic or not established by the text. Or when I say I'm not familiar with it, I just mean I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so you've never heard of that?
I've never, I've heard of rulings about fasting, what's called Yom HaShek, or like the day that is in doubt.
Right, yeah, that you're not supposed to do that.
Right, you're not supposed to do that. That comes back to the necessity of intention for acts of worship. So if one is fasting, if one intends to fast the first of Ramadan and you don't really know if it's the first of Ramadan or the 31st of Sha'ban, that would in effect invalidate that act of worship, because you it's almost like praying before you know the time has come in. If somebody is praying Isha and you ask them before they make the Takbiratul Ihram, that first opening, Allahu Akbar, is Isha in? And they say, I don't know. Well, if you don't know, how could you be praying Isha? So it's very similar with Ramadan. If someone asks, is today the first of Ramadan? And a person says, well, I don't know, I'm just fasting in case it is. That would not be counted as a day that one is fasted for the month of Ramadan. And maybe, one of the things, and this is, mashallah, you give me an opportunity to talk about a lesser known aspect of our history. Muslims were not only a majority unlettered people, but they were also people that did not excel at advanced numerocracy, which is like counting and calculation. So, there is a, when we as moderns, we keep a very close watch on dates and times. And I think that it is natural for us to assume that pre-modern people did the same thing, that pre-modern people knew their birthdays in the way that we know our birthdays, and that they knew the days of the week in the same way that we know the days of the week. Right. You know, that they knew the days of the week like we know the days, or that they knew the time like we know the time. You know, I always joke, whenever we're sitting in the mosque, holding our dates, counting down the seconds until the adhan for sunset prayer, I always joke, you know, none of the early Muslims ever did this, you know, because they didn't have that, they didn't have the measurement of time with such exactitude. It wasn't like Sayyidina Omar is sitting there with the dates going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, everybody can eat now. No, it wasn't, you know, time was understood in a much more general way. Time was understood almost like, you know, if you look and it appears to be, you know, Maghrib, it's Maghrib, right? Now, to their credit, they were much more attuned to watching the sky and the celestial bodies and the stars than we are, right? So maybe it was easier for them to detect, you know, a true sunset as opposed to, you know, something that wasn't a true sunset, etc. But whenever I see rulings like the ruling you mentioned, I think it's trying to prevent people from getting confused about, is it Ramadan? Is it Sha'ban? Should I be fasting? Shouldn't I be fasting? Which fast is non-obligatory? Which fast is obligatory? You know, this is what immediately comes to mind, but I'm not familiar at all with the ruling that the lecturer or the speaker that you were listening to on YouTube was referring to, which does not mean that it's inauthentic or not real. It just means that, you know, my knowledge is limited as far as that particular ruling goes.
Okay, yeah, I wish he just said the reason for it, like in the lecture that he mentioned it.
Which is, I mean, was the lecture from the 1400s or something? No, I'm just, because, you know, the idea that a ruling like that, somebody would just mention it with no context is quite strange. You know, someone just said, you know, don't fast in the second half of Sha'ban. I think, you know, that would prompt me to naturally ask, well, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know, but yeah, which is another thing that I think is interesting is, yes, it's good that we are observant Muslims. And as observant Muslims, many of us are prepared to accept things that we don't completely understand. Like, I don't understand why the sunset prayer, Salat al-Maghrib, is 3 units of prayer, and why the night prayer, Isha, is 4 units. It's tawqifi. It's something that comes directly from God, and I accept it as, you know, a practitioner of Islam. But, you know, religion can become burdensome to people when that category of things that we just accept because we believe they are from God, when that category is enlarged to where everything becomes like that. People are just telling you, you know, if it's like some things are like that, I feel like the ratio is, okay, it's like, okay, right? There's some things that I do understand, and there's some things that I don't. Some things have rationales that can be explained and be, you know, understood and are, you know, easily comprehended by a person with a sound mind. And other things don't have rationales beyond, you know, we do this to obey God's command. I think, you know, one makes a grave mistake when teaching Islam if one teaches everything as though there is no reason, there is no rationale, there is no critical analysis, there is no weighing of whether or not this is applicable or relevant in our context. I'm just giving it to you the way that it's printed in the book. I think, I'm not saying that's what the lecturer was doing, but that is something as a teacher of, you know, Islam, that is something that I'm very wary of, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll let you know if I hear any explanation of why that's so, like, as I'm watching more lectures.
Yes, please. I do know of a ruling in one Islamic school of law that says that fasting the 6 days of Shawwal, doing it right after Ramadan, is disliked, because one could be confused about, are these days from Ramadan or not?
Right, like maybe we want to leave the month apart from all the other months to make it special. Like
that's what I'm kind of inclining toward. But again, I'm not familiar with the direct ruling.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Other things, other questions, other Ramadan related questions? I think the next time we see each other, it will be Ramadan, I think.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you? So yes, I do have a question, if you don't mind, if we have time before your lecture. It's about when you mentioned about the precision of calculating and measuring the time in Islam, where the Quran in multiple verses said وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ, and many times it's exactly by exact seconds, and as you said, Maghrib is per second, for the Fajr, everything per minute and seconds in Islam. But when it comes to Ramadan, a lot of people still look at the moon and they say, oh, we have to fast because we see the moon or we see the crescent. And we start Eid when they keep quoting the hadith, which is part of the hadith, the second part of the hadith, not the initial part. And people they use that the same thing with a lot of ayat and a lot of hadith. When they take part of it and they believe in it. And you probably the rest of the hadith, or the beginning of the hadith, when the Prophet said, Inna ummatun ummiya, or innakum ummatun ummiya, means you're illiterate at that time, which is true. The Muslims at the beginning of Islam, they were illiterate. They didn't know how to read, write, or do any of these advanced mathematical equations. But with advancement, now we can calculate the second, the exact part of the second, when the moon gonna come out and when it's gonna hide, and how to even know the exact Ramadan for the next 100 years. Not just next year or next week and next month, but still a lot of people struggle. Pakistan have Ramadan Tuesday, Kuwait have Ramadan on Monday, someone has Ramadan on Wednesday, and Eid is the same thing. Like, what's going on here? Every place has its own Eid.
You know what? It's interesting, Brother Muhammad. This argument has taken on a life of its own. I find that when people are talking about physical sighting or calculation, they're really not talking about physical sighting or calculation. I find that what they're really debating is what our position should be vis-a-vis the scientific and technological advancements of modernity. This is really what they're talking about, right? And I've heard compelling arguments on all sides. This is what, because what's interesting about this is that even the people that, I've also heard much contradiction on both sides, right? So even the people that maintain, and I know people like, this is an issue that divides communities. I know people that are so strict about the physical sighting. They're very strict about the physical sighting. Like, no, the moon must be sighted with the naked eye. And this is like one of those things that if they're very lenient and very accepting of divergent and different opinions in everything else in Islam, when it comes to the issue of the moon being sighted with the naked eye for Ramadan, they're like super mutashaddid, strict, and I'm like, but you pray northeast to the Qibla. The only way that one could establish that northeast is the direction of Mecca from North America, Canada, where you are, or the US, is through the use of very sophisticated vectorial calculus. There's not anything apparent. Like if you were to ask someone looking at a very simple map Mecca appears to be southeast from North America. It appears to be southeast from North America. But most people, and now some very, I'm not going to call them extreme, but we'll call them consistent. I know some very consistent neo-traditionals, they even pray to a southeast qibla because their argument is everything, this is their argument. Their argument is everything worship of the Muslims is based must cater to the least common denominator among us, right? Meaning very simple, unlettered people that, don't have these kinds of mathematical equations at their disposal. One Chicago-based scholar named Sheikh Amin, he said, they don't need to know calculus or anything like that. They just need to use their telephone. You don't have to be, and his argument was anybody can do that. Anybody can use the telephone. So but their argument is anything upon which the worship of the Muslims is based, the soundness of the worship of the Muslims is based, must be something that can be ascertained through plain sense reasoning, not complex mathematical calculation. Another argument they use is, and this is more of a philosophical argument, they say, our community is not a community of empty time. It's a community of meaningful time. So that, when you look at like the way the times of the prayers were originally conceived, it's through celestial, astronomical and environmental phenomena, the length of shadows, the sun, the movement of the sun. It's not just simply numbers on a piece of paper that, and they locate meaning in connecting time to environmental and natural phenomena, that there's something meaningful about that. And they also bring that argument into Ramadan. Now, on the other side, I've also heard compelling arguments, right? They say that by using mathematical calculation, we are able to plan more effectively. Like you said, not Ramadan just this year, but we're able to arrange our work schedules. We're able to arrange our trading schedules for people that deal with the bursa. We're able to arrange our school schedules for students in school. And this has maslahah. There is practical benefit for the Muslim community in being able to systematize our holidays, knowing that Eid al-Adha is this day, Eid al-Fitr is this day, right? Another argument they make is that, yes, these are not, phenomena that are clear to the naked eye, but just because they aren't clear to the naked eye does not mean that they don't exist. We actually know when the new moon is really born, right? We know through, astronomical calculation when the new moon is actually born. So maybe in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, if they had access to such precise calculation, they would of course make use of that calculation, but they didn't have access to that calculation, and we do. My thing is this. I incline toward the physical sighting. I'm gonna be honest with you, but I don't demonize, nor do I, delegitimize the calculation argument. If a community uses calculation, right, mashallah. And I think another thing, ikhtilafu ummati rahma, the difference of opinion among my community is a rahma. Many people say this is a fabricated hadith, right? Including Ibn Jawzi. He said this hadith is mawdu', this hadith is made up. But the meaning is certainly true, right? The meaning is certainly true. That, the fact that you do have different ways of doing things ends up being just de facto accommodation for the ummah, right? You know, you can, you know, there's accommodation in, you know, the fact that, you know, different approaches are taken to different things. The second silver lining there, you know, once I was talking to, you know, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he wrote a small treatise called Caesarean Moon Births. As you can see, he's definitely not into the calculation. You know, so he's definitely not into, you know, he is actually someone that's very staunch in opposition to the calculation. But, you know, I remember conversing with him and saying, you know, I really don't think it's that big a deal. I don't think calculation is, yeah, I don't think it's like the spawn of shaitan. Like, you know, in some communities, they talk about calculation like this is from the devil. I'm sick. Like, for me, it's almost like, what are we talking about here? You know, 'cause I'm a little lost, but somehow they've understood calculation to be like a shaitanic plot that will help to disconnect us from nature and, you know, lead us into this modern context of empty time and prognostication and measuring time. Where they go with it, Brother Muhammad, it's amazing. It's quite amazing. I actually just read a really good book called Modern Muslim Theology, in which Professor Martin Wynn was talking about time. And he had a lot to say about modern notions of time. And, you know, these are inconsistent with kind of traditional notions of time. And so people are very passionate about it. But for me, the fact that we argue about these things, yes, it's tiresome and it can become really ugly, but it says that we still care about this stuff, man. Like, Muslims actually still care about this stuff. And I'm much more, like, the argument is so played out, it's so tired, it's so hackneyed, it's so shop worn. These same arguments about calculation and moon sightings, and it's so worn out, it's so tired. But I will actually be more worried when we stop arguing, when it becomes no, who cares? That's when I actually say, okay, we're in trouble now. You know, the Muslims are really changing, and maybe their connection to the day-to-day of their faith is beginning to weaken or lessen or decrease. So, to your exact point, Sheikh Muhammad, yes, there is quite a bit of compelling argument about why we should use calculation, and there is quite a bit of compelling argument to the contrary. I think it's just one of those things upon which we differ. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. Shukran. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah
khair. Just one follow-up, and maybe I missed it, but one small point you made about the quote-unquote neo-traditionalists. You'd mentioned that they pray to the southeast. Is that about the orientation from Medina to Mecca, or?
No. Actually, there's a good book called Port in a Storm over this controversy of the direction of the Qibla in North America. And their basic argument is anything upon which the soundness of worship is based, like the direction of Mecca, must be, one must be able to ascertain that through plain sense, right? So it's kind of a philosophical argument that, you know, I mean, think about it this way, Ismail. Think about it like tayammum, right? Tayammum is making ritual ablution with dirt. Now, if the purpose of ablution was to make one physically clean, obviously dirt probably wouldn't be a good choice for that. But the goal, of course, is to make one ritually clean, right? So what they're essentially saying is that the rituals of the Muslims, right, have their own logic that is something different than science. It's something different than physics. Like the rituals, yes, the rituals of the Muslims have an internal logic that is all their own. So they're saying that ritually, the direction of Mecca from North America is southeast, ritually, you see, because that is what can be ascertained by just a plain sense, you know, cartographical, a person looking at a map, or a person, you know, looking at the setting of the sun. What can be ascertained via just plain sense reasoning without, you know, calculus, without, you know, the modern instruments of science and technology, is that Mecca is southeast from America, right? So their argument is kind of like, you know, rituals have their own, they have their own logic, right? And accessibility is much more important than correctness. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Those points all make sense to me in isolation. I have difficulty assembling that complete picture, but I guess that's, yeah, somebody just commented about a flat earth point. Right. But also
right, and it does, because, you know, and now what's tripped out, this is what is like blew my mind, is that even though, of course, I mean, you know, I don't need Copernicus to tell me that the world is round, you know what I'm saying? I believe the world is round. When I experienced the roundness of the world, it did shock me, right? So there is a, you know, my first time traveling abroad, I was on a flight to Yemen. And when I looked at the flight tracker and I saw that we were like descending, coming down like over Germany, I was thinking, why would he do that? You know, I was thinking, you know, I remember looking at the flight tracker thinking, why in the world, why is he doing this? Why, like, is the plane being hijacked? Or like I momentarily got like, wait a minute, my plane is off course. My plane is off course. And then only after another 45 seconds did I think, oh my God, the world is round. So when you're going to Yemen, you go like this, you know, like, oh my God. So it's something that we know, but on the level of like experience, not until an experience like that do you really like realize that the world is round, right? Which it's so, you know, it's almost like, it's like the verse in Surah Al-Kahf, you know, in the 18th chapter, about the sun setting in murky water. Now, of course, we know that the sun does not rise or set. It is merely the Earth's rotation that makes the sun appear to be rising and setting. The sun is not rising and it's not setting, right? But if we take for granted that the experience of human beings is terrestrial, right? It's something that we experience from Earth, not from the sky, right? Which maybe Elon Musk is trying to change that. I don't know. But our experience is a terrestrial experience. It appears that the sun sets into the water. So all of the tafsir of the ayah, they say, فِي رَأْيِ عَيْنِ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ, that it's just in the eyesight of Dhul Qarnayn, the sun appears to be setting in the water. But of course, the sun doesn't actually set in water, right? So, you know, it's strange. Nonetheless, I do get it in terms of like separating like this priority of ritual being something accessible even to a simpleton, and ritual cannot be based on something which requires you know, modern, very complex science, because it wouldn't be accessible to everybody.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't want to linger on it too much. I think that it feels like one of those points that's probably moot in the way that our community practices, but
right.
That is fascinating.
I mean, I pray Northeast. Almost everyone that I know prays Northeast. This book, Port in a Storm, very interesting. It's very, very technical. But if you're someone that that appreciates technicality, and if you love science, you'll really appreciate that book. You really appreciate that book. But right, I mean, the earth is not flat, as Muhammad said, religiously or scientifically. But these are some of the arguments that people do make.
Fair.
I mean, the argument might appeal to Kyrie Irving or somebody like that. My daughter said that. My daughter said, I mean, I don't know why I found this so amusing. My daughter said that she was on YouTube and she saw something about flat earthers. So she clicked and she said that the guy said, "What are you talking about? Us flat earthers are all over the globe."
Yep.
And I was just like, hey, I mean, I think
irony is dead.
The irony is dead. It's like us flat earthers are all over the globe. I said, you probably didn't mean to say globe. You know what I'm saying? Bismillah.
Brother, I don't know if we have time. I don't want to really take you away from your speech,
No.
but
The purpose of the class is really open exchange.
Okay, perfect.
Talk about, but the floor is open.
Perfect. Since you're not a mathematical person and you lean toward environmental calculation and you want to see the moon, see the sunrise, and see the sunset for fasting Ramadan, how come most of the current Muslims use the exact measurement in terms of Fajr? The Fajr prayer these days in the current era, the current Islamic era, uses the night, the 18 degrees below the horizon, which is called the night to the, I think, astronomical twilight.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, Muhammad, I don't deny that my choice of citing the moon is a very arbitrary one.
Right.
Because when I pray Dhuhr, I don't go outside and check the length of my shadow. I just look on my phone and say Chicago prayer time. Like, which honestly, I mean, a lot of us aren't even aware of how imprecise, how big Chicago, like when someone says Chicago prayer time, Chicago as a city is one of the largest in terms of land area. It's one of the largest cities in the world.
Right.
I mean, it's got to be top. It's got to be top. I think last I read, Chicago was in the top 15, top 10 in terms of like land area, not population.
Right.
In the world. So if a person is sitting at the southernmost tip of Chicago and another person is sitting at the northernmost tip of Chicago, it is impossible that their Fajr could be at the same time. It's impossible. It's impossible.
So this is
the schedule and we say it's 5:12. Allahu Akbar. I mean.
So perfect. Now the question comes to actually a very important point. The night and astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, civil twilight, and then the daylight comes out. This calculation happened between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, or Mecca and Egypt, two schools of Islamic thoughts, and they decided for safety purposes to make Fajr 18 degrees below the horizon. So it means Adhan of Fajr happens 18 degrees below the horizon. In the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Egypt, that kind of midline where the most of Islamic countries lies around, or at that same kind of equator kind of line, the between Fajr and or between the night into astronomical twilight is very short. In fact, between the shift between night and daylight is almost like an hour and 15 minutes. So that's why Fajr happens very quick, Imsak happens very quick, and then daylight. Mm-hmm. In the Western world, where people live up north the equator line, mm-hmm. like you in Chicago, like us in Canada, between Fajr and the sunrise, almost 3 hours. So what I'm trying to think here, it's kind of unfair that we're using the mathematical calculation of 18 degrees based on the Middle East and Egypt, where in the North American Chicago or north of that line, the 3 hours of between night and daylight is almost 3 hours. So the Fajr, the true Fajr, is actually between 6 and 0 degrees between the horizon. So anything beyond that, so if you adjust if you're using, I don't know what application you use on your phone for prayers, if you adjust the angle, you will notice if you adjust your angle to 8 degrees instead of 18, you'll notice there's a huge shift in time. Instead of you waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll be able to wake up at 5 o'clock to pray Fajr and eat suhoor before you go.
And this is why this هذه حجة عليك وليست لك. This is actually proof against you.
Why?
Because people that say we should use a physical sighting, they cite those kinds of complications. They say if everybody went out and just look for the white thread, they just look for that first true dawn that can be seen with the naked eye, it would actually be more accurate than using 18 degrees in Egypt and generalizing, making that applicable to Canada, that everybody should just go out, look at the horizon. When you see the first true light of dawn coming through that distinct white thread, then it's Fajr. If you don't see it, keep eating, right? So their point is that these calculations, there's so much to them that a regular simpleton, wahid basit kamisli, could be confused. But if I just use my eyesight and I just say, do you think it's Fajr? No, it's completely dark. Pass me another biscuit. Pass me 2 eggs. Wait, do you think it's Fajr? No, it's still completely dark. Give me some cereal. You think it's Fajr? No, it's completely dark. Give me some bacon. Oh, wait, I see it.
I like your thinking.
I can see it now. Don't give me the eggs. I see it. Okay, call the other. That's actually their point. So now, me, myself, I use the calendar. I mean, and this is what's strange. Having given all of this some thought, I'm just a thoroughly modern person. Like, I use a calendar. I mean, I use a calendar. I put it on the refrigerator, even though I'm like in the middle of Chicago. Whatever the calendar says for Chicago, I just gotta go with it. But I try to give it 15 minutes just to be on the semi-safe side. So whatever time the calendar says, I pray. So whatever time the calendar says, I stop eating at that time. But I don't pray until another 15 minutes, just to be sure that the prayer is in whenever I pray.
But the calendar you have, that's what I'm trying to say. It's 18 degrees based on the Middle East. What I'm trying to, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that if there is an adjustment on your own calculator, on your own calendar, if you adjust that to 12 degrees, you will gain that 15 minutes you're giving yourself, or 20 minutes you're giving yourself. That's exactly what I'm trying to point out here. And that's what I actually do. I don't follow the 18 degrees. I actually adjust that to 12 degrees to myself. And in that case, I'm not in the 6 degree, which is the Fajr, but I'm not at 18 degree, which makes it so extremely long for me to wake up 3 hours before true Fajr. And create a bit of mess and time shift for me, especially at 2 o'clock, waking up at Fajr at 2 o'clock in Canada sometimes, right?
No, as you get up into Canada, I mean, the iftar time can be so short. I remember like one summer, iftar was like at 11, and then imsak was like at 2. I was like, oh my, what? This is crazy. This is, you know. So no, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think we should. You know, these are things about which we need to have more creative kind of solutions. We have to look at our tradition in all of its broadness and try to come up with things that are more sensible, you know. But I agree. So the only thing I tell Muslims is, if you get a method, if you select a method, you're going to use the physical sighting, a certain calendar, a certain calculation, just stick to it throughout the month. Don't change on the basis of how good your cooking was last night. It's like, normally use this, but seeing as though I really want to eat, I'm going to use this today. Whatever method you choose, try to stick with it throughout the entire month. That's the only thing that I stipulate there. My sister Hala, had a question about fasting with double intention. Actually, there is an opinion that you can fast with double intention, right? So it's like if a person enters the mosque, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, he said, when you enter the mosque, do not sit down, right? Do not take your seat without praying 2 rak'ah. Now this, in terms of Islamic legal theory, this ends up being quite a significant hadith, right? One thing that it establishes is that the Prophet, peace be upon him, can speak in the language of command, but it's not a command for wujub. It's not a command for obligation. It's a command for recommendation, right? And this ends up being significant in many areas, that, this is how we arrive at the position that having a beard is a sunnah, but it's not an obligation. Because the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, I command you to lengthen the beard and to trim the mustache. But many scholars established, by way of different narrations, that it was a command, but it was a command for recommendation, not a command for obligation. So no one is under an obligation to have a beard, even though the language is the language of obligation, right? So the other aspect of this hadith about entering the mosque is, someone asks, what if I enter the mosque and I just pray 2 rak'ah of sunnah before fajr? Meaning, I don't pray 2 specific units of prayer to greet the mosque for tahiyyat al-masjid. I just pray 2 units of prayer, 2 sunnahs, right? 2 rak'ah of sunnah before sitting down. Does this also mean that I have complied with the order of the Prophet or the recommendation of the Prophet to pray 2 units of prayer before taking my seat? And almost unanimously, the scholars said yes. Likewise, if someone is making up days of their fasting and they want to combine with that the intention of fasting one of the 6 days of Shawwal, or they want to make up a day of their fasting and fast Ashura, or make up a day of their fasting and fast on a Monday or Thursday, or make up a day of their Ramadan and fast Ayam at-Tashriq, the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of each lunar month. You can actually combine those intentions. So to your point and phraseology, Hala, you can double dip. Double dipping is allowed, mashallah. Alhamdulillah.
Sorry, just to clarify this question, do you have have a primary intention and then a secondary intention? Is that, or you can have
if one of your, if you're making an intention for a fard prayer, right? If you're making an intention for something fard, you can also get the benefit, the ajr and the benefit of doing something nafil, of doing something non-obligatory.
Okay, so the primary intention has to be fard.
But the primary intention has to be fard. You can't get an intention for a fard by making a primary intention that's a nafil, right? So if one intends to like I said, make up a day of Ramadan, but do it on a Monday, you can also get the favor, the fadl of fasting on a Monday. But the primary intention is to make up a day of Ramadan. If one intends to pray to sunnah, entering the masjid, you can also get the reward of tahiyyat al-masjid, of greeting the masjid, right? But you cannot, if you intend to pray tahiyyat al-masjid, pray salat al-fajr. You can't do that, right? The primary intention has to be fard.
Assalamu
alaikum, Ubayd.
Walaikum salam.
I was very amused by the discussion about when to start the fast.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm very similar to you in that I rely on like an app or like a computer or like a calendar to say like, oh, Fajr is starting, like to the extent where I'll see like, I have one app that has like a countdown, like literally from like when Fajr is going to start. And like I'll be looking at it and then I have 10 seconds left to like drink like water or something like that. And then I'm just like, okay, this is what I'm going to use. And I'm like very consistent with it. My dad, on the other hand, and I think a lot of people like from like his like era are just kind of much more
much looser.
Yeah, much looser to the point where it's like I feel like I'm putting an artificial amount of precision to it, where it's like, oh, this is it, like Fajr started at this moment, and then my dad will be like eating for like another 5 minutes, like 10 minutes, pushing it maybe into like 15 or something like that. There's no real like question attached to this. I just wanted to comment that, and I think that then of a consequence of have reduced, yeah, like you said, time to whatever, and then you go by. I think for North America, it's actually 15 degrees is what it was established, at least some of the masajid that I saw. But yeah, anyway, I don't know. That was just my thought on the subject.
It's a very interesting observation. I don't know why using a calendar and doing those kinds of like countdowns, even though I recognize some of the arbitrary silliness in it, like personally, like now if one wanted to be super precise and measure according to 15 degrees, the time of Fajr from the precise location of their house, we actually have the technology within our grasp where one could do that. But I've never done that. I just look up like Chicago on, using an application on my phone or a schedule that I get at the mosque. And I think it just gives me clarity to just go according to that schedule. Whatever I put on the refrigerator at the beginning of the month, I just stick with that. But if I see someone else still eating or finishing a plate or drinking some water, alhamdulillah, I know better than to say, oh my God, you violated, that's Hetku Hurmati Shahri Ramadan, and you have to make up a day. Like I realize that there's absolutely no place for that. You know what I'm saying? So your father is well within a permissible boundary of beginning his Ramadan, beginning his fasting. But there's something about our sensibility that I think is how can I say it? It's our sensibility is somehow relieved at very precise measures of time. I just feel more clear with very precise measures of time. But I do realize this is something that, you know, I'm adopting as a practice, but not something everyone else has to adopt.
Yeah, I think I'm uncomfortable with imprecision, even though it's probably that's just the way life was, you know, for a long time. And if it's something, it seems to me quite subjective to go up to the horizon and look at it and be like, oh, the white thread is separate from the black thread or whatever. And, you know, that's clearly how things were done. You know, but
you know, I've actually heard stories of people in the same village, but one set of dwellings is like in a valley, and another set of dwellings is kind of on the outer rim of the, and their Fajr times would be like 25 minutes apart. Based on, this is like in like West Africa, I heard like a story like this, like in Mauritania, based on their physical sighting and their physical sighting. Like life was just imprecise in that way. You know what I'm saying? Other questions?
Assalamu alaikum. I do have a question.
How
are you doing? So, but it's not related to Ramadan or fasting. It's a general question. More related to, I guess, grief and dreams. So when somebody, like somebody's family member passes away, and you know people are having dreams of this person, but somebody close is not having dreams and feeling maybe down about it. I guess what are your thoughts about that? And the person might be feeling that, is there some, are my, you know, prayers not being answered, for example, or and just another question too. I know this is mental health in Islam, but like when I work with clients too, dealing with grief, for example, sometimes there's, I guess reminiscing on, you know how like in Islam, there's an emphasis on the deeds or the actions at the end of somebody's life. So let's say somebody, you know, did not end on a positive note or remembers negative experiences. How would you encourage, you know, dealing with those situations?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. MashaAllah, you know, Summer, when you look at somebody's wall and you see the whole world on the wall, they're either a humanitarian concerned about the whole world or a dictator trying to conquer the whole world. You know, which one are you? We see that you're, we see the concern.
I like to travel.
But to your point, you know, dreams, you know, subhanAllah, you know, before I became Muslim, I don't think I ever attached such importance to dreams, you know, and that's not to say that my position vis-a-vis dreams then was the ideal position, but I don't know. I mean, it's somehow still very difficult for me to think about my dreams as kind of a, you know, a means through which God communicates with me, right? The Prophet ﷺ said that the last remaining part of revelation that will remain until Yawm al-Qiyamah is the ru'yat al-sadiqa, the ru'ya al-sadiqa, no ta marbuta. So actually an alif maksura, but is the true dream, right? So I do understand a lot of the spiritual significance that Muslims associate with dreams, right? The Prophet, peace be upon him, spoke in an authentic hadith and said, whoever sees me in a dream has seen me, right? Because the devil is not allowed to assume my image. The devil does not take my form. You know, again, you know, there's a significance given to dreams. The Prophet ﷺ himself would interpret the dreams of the companions. And you still have people, I'm not one of those people, but you still have people that do interpret dreams. So even though I don't personally relate to this culture of giving heightened importance to dreams, it's not my direct personal experience, I do understand. I'm saying all of that to say I do understand, and I do understand kind of the legitimate religious basis for connecting this kind of significance to dreams. However, even if we connect this kind of significance to dreams, it is not at all a proper conclusion that if we don't have a certain dream, or we don't experience something that we've been praying for in a dream, that God is not communicating with us, that God is not listening to us, God is not answering our prayers. I think that would be, to my mind, kind of overstepping, a kind of, yes, religiously recognized significance that dreams do have, but I've never seen in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or any of kind of our righteous forebears, that the lack of dreams was regarded as a sure sign that one had been forsaken by God, or one was not being favored by God, or, you do have people that I think, speaking with a lot of hyperbole, taking certain licenses that we give to poets. You do have people that said things like, oh, you guys don't regularly see true dreams and things that are going to happen tomorrow. Oh, it's because your ibadah is inadequate. You have statements like that. Ibn Ta'ala said something like that in Taj al-Arus, but I think those statements must be understood with poetic license. I think those statements must be understood with poetic license. I don't think that those statements are to be understood literally. That if you don't have true dreams and you don't see things in your dreams and you don't experience kashf, you don't experience unveilings in your dreams, it's because you're ba'id anillah, because you're far from Allah or something like that. I don't think any of that is actually true. I think that these dreams do provide us with great solace. Sometimes they provide us with insight. Sometimes they answer pressing questions that we have, that we've prayed istikhara about and things like that. And sometimes the answers and the insights and the solace that we seek, they come in other forms. They come in forms that we experience as we are in a state of yaqza, as we are in a wakeful state. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, don't just look for things with your eyes closed. Also look for things with your eyes open. Maybe there isn't this revelatory dream that one has, been praying for, that one believes that their resolution to some issue will be found in, but maybe it's an epiphany while watching the sunset at Lake Michigan. Maybe you're sitting at Lake Michigan, or maybe you're sitting in traffic. Doesn't have to be anything as momentous and beautiful as Lake Michigan and sunset. Maybe you're sitting in traffic, just a part of the daily grind, or maybe you're sitting teaching a class on Zoom, and you look, at your brother Ismail Ali, and you think, oh my God, that question I've been thinking about, I got it. The contentment that I'm seeking, I feel it. I'm okay now. So my point is that don't get so involved with the dream that, your pursuit of a particular means to solace or consolation or comfort gets in the way of the end of solace or consolation or comfort. What you really want is solace. You want, comfort. You want something that, helps to alleviate some of your grief, some of your stress, some of your anxiety. Maybe that does come in the form of a dream. Maybe it comes in some other form. Maybe it comes as you are cycling down the street. Maybe it comes as you are playing soccer. Maybe it comes as you are, fixing dinner for your mom. Maybe it comes as you are taking your children to the park. Don't be so obsessed with the means that you forget the end, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That makes perfect sense. That's very helpful.
And then the other question that you asked, and I think we're gonna have to actually make this one the last one because I still have to actually pray my asr, so I'm gonna cut out just a little bit early, inshallah. But remind me again of the last question that you asked. About mental health.
Oh, no, it's related to the ends, how there's emphasis on the ends of people's lives and.
Oh, yes.
But I don't mind even holding that for another.
No. Well, there's two aspects there. One, that's kind of the way it is in terms of the khatima. I think of, honestly, I was railing against the electoral college, right? One day I was talking about the electoral college, and I was, telling, I think, my daughter about some of the historical details around why we have an electoral college. This idea that, we have to prevent, mobocracy, mob rule, and, some of the racial and class realities, around the creation of the electoral college in America. And that if it was a pure democratic process, right, the popular vote would decide. And I don't know how I came across this conservative article about the electoral college. And they said, well, if you look at the World Series, this was the year the Cubs won, right? This was 16. The Indians actually scored more total runs than the Chicago Cubs. But that's not the way we keep score. We keep score game by game. I was like, oh man, that's kind of good. Now I actually know that in soccer, it's different. You actually do go by total points, right? Over the course of many different games, I think, right? Yes, like in soccer, you actually do go by total points. But he was saying, like in baseball or basketball, we don't go by total points. If, in a series, if the first game a team loses by 30, and then they come back and win by 1, it's just 1-1. It's not that the other team is up 29 points, right? And then I started thinking about the husn al-khatimah, in that way, that it's just kind of like that if a person does 75 years of good deeds, and then they die upon the renunciation of faith, our religious teaching actually maintains that they died in the state of a person who renounced faith, not the person who did 75 years worth of good deeds. And my daughter was saying, Dad, that's just not fair. And I was like, well, babe, I totally understand how you feel like that. But like the electoral college, like the way score is kept in baseball, it's kind of just like, that's just the way it is. That's the way it is. To your direct point though, about making amends with people, I wish there was an easier answer than this is why it's unwise to hold grudges that can be resolved, forgiven, is that you just don't know when the end might occur. It's, in this sense, in terms of your worship of God, in terms of your expressing love for the people that you love, in terms of your willingness to forgive people, you really should live every day like it's your last, because it really could be. Or it could be the last day of the person that you're holding this petty grudge for, right? It really could be. Like you really could, like, you know, I'm not speaking to that person, you know, for a while because they didn't like my picture, you know, on Instagram, and the person might die. Like that could actually happen. And I think we have a religious teaching that forces us to keep that in the purview of consideration. But we're gonna have to leave it there, inshallah, because I need to pray. But we'll pick back up on that note, and maybe on the note of me actually addressing what was put in the chat about authority. But we just got off to a beautiful conversation. And mashallah, your brother-in-law Muhammad, you know, he asked some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful questions, and Hala and Ismail. So this was really an enjoyable session. I'll find out from Sana what we're doing next week, because Ramadan might be starting on the 12th. Again, Muhammad, now he knows exactly the minute that Ramadan is starting. I don't know yet, okay? So when I find out, I'll tell you, inshallah, khair. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, al-Asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen.